Today we're going to go over the ACME machine build your own kit. I remember when the first time I built my first AR, I had to gather up all the parts myself, order from here, order from there, order everywhere, just to wait to get all the parts. Now we have it all in one kit and you can build it yourself. And I'll always remember my first rifle I built. Even though I've built hundreds of rifles since then, the first one's the one I remember the most. So ACME wants to give you that opportunity to make the same memory that I had. Very first rifle. So let's get into it. Today we're going to break it down all the pieces and show you how to assemble it to create your very first rifle. Let's see what's in the box. In the box you'll find the lower receiver, upper receiver, buttstock, bolt carrier group, charging handle, barrel, handguard, and miscellaneous pieces you need to complete these different sub-assemblies into one assembly of a rifle. Let's get started. First thing you want to do is take an inventory. I like to separate the parts out into upper parts and lower parts. The lower receiver has all its parts prepackaged for you in a plastic bag. Set those to the side for now. Let's set the lower to the side for now. This grip is part of the lower parts kit. The buttstock tube and buffer assembly is also part of the lower parts kit. And the buttstock itself. The upper assembly consists of the upper receiver, parts you need to complete the upper receiver, the barrel assembly, the handguard assembly, gas block, gas tube, A2 flash hider, bolt carrier group, and charging handle. Now, let's start building the lower receiver first. Let's empty all the lower parts out and get them separated to their sub-assemblies. The hammer, the trigger, disconnector, the hammer and trigger pins, and the safety. Other receiver parts include the pivot pins and takedown pins, magazine release button, magazine catch, bolt catch, and buffer retainer pin. Now let's get the springs in the right places. When you open up your spring pack, you're going to notice that some of your springs are very similar. However, they're not all the same. Let's take a close look at those and decide where they need to go. The largest spring is part of the mag catch assembly. This is a trigger spring. This is a hammer spring. This small pin here and this spring are for the bolt catch. Sorry, let's do that again. That was wrong spring. The next largest spring is for the buffer retainer pin. You'll notice there are two springs that are very similar, but don't do the same thing. One of the springs is flared out and is a little bigger on one end than the other. This is the disconnector spring. This spring is for the bolt catch. These two pins are detent pins for the takedown pins and the pivot pin. This pin is for the selector. You see we have three springs here. Two are smaller diameter. One is a larger diameter. The larger diameter spring goes to the selector. The smaller diameter springs are for the takedown pins. Now that we have all our parts grouped together where they need to go, let's start putting it together. For the hammer spring, you have to think about how a hammer is working and what a hammer is doing. So when you slip it over, you'll notice the hammer is going to drive forward, so you want the spring so that it will drive the hammer forward. The trigger the loops over the ends of the trigger here. And you can see the spring operates the trigger. Now the disconnector spring we talked about earlier has a flared end that's larger diameter than the other end. This is pressed into the trigger in the small hole, and the flare allows it to be retained by its own pressure. The disconnector then sits into the trigger assembly with a notch for the spring, as you see here. And when it's assembled into the lower, the trigger pin will retain the disconnector and the trigger together as one piece. Now, for the lower, I like to start at the front and work my way to the back. So for the front, you have the front takedown pin. The front takedown pin is the longer pin of the two, and it has a flat cutout to right against the side of the receiver. To install this part, you take one of the small diameter springs, and there's a small hole in the front of the receiver. Can the camera see it up there? I don't know if you can zoom in. Let's see it. Put in the hole, take one of the small detent pins, and place it inside. This is where people usually have parts flying around. If you're just a little careful, you can get this to go in. You see the groove on the pins interact with the detent pin, and that's what captures the pin and allows you to slide it in and out to assemble or disassemble the rifle. With the groove to the side, carefully press down the pin and slide it in until you get to here. Now rotate the pin until the detent pin clicks into place. Now the pin is captured, and when closed, it stays closed unless you put enough force on it to break it free of the detent pin. Next we have the magazine catch and magazine catch spring, and the mag release button. So on the receiver, on the left side, drop the magazine catch into place, holding it, take the spring, place over the top. Notice there's two sides of this. One is grooved, one is not. Take the non-grooved side and press it and just start to thread it onto the catch. So now that we have that started, we can press the mag release button in as far as we can with our finger. Start threading it into the mag release button. Now, pull it up and rotate it past these points. When the bolt is flush with the end, that's when you know you've gone far enough. Some people like to take a punch and set it and press it so they can spin this freely. But you can also just grab it with your hands and pull it above the spring pressure and keep rotating it until you get flush. This is not the easiest way, but it's the easiest way to do it without tools. One more turn. Just where we want it. So now we have that flush. You can see when we actuate the magazine release, the magazine will drop free. Now, the bolt catch. ACME Machine has a special feature on their lower that some lowers don't have that I really appreciate when I'm putting these together. Instead of a roll pin, they have a threaded pin that'll hold it in. If you've never done this before, you don't know what you're missing. You don't know how nice it is to have this. If you have built one before, you're going to appreciate this more than anything. So I take the small spring and a small plunger. And here's a hole machined. Place that in the hole. The bolt release. The magazine catch goes here. Sorry. The magazine catch goes to the front. The paddle goes to the outside with a small nub to the bottom. Install it, press it and hold with your thumb. Take this small pin and push it until it pushes through the hole. Now you need a 1/16 Allen key, and you just screw it in. Other lowers have a roll pin that you have to use a punch through. This is much easier and a much stronger and a much better design. Buffalo travel in herds. There's strength in herds. There. Now the bolt catch is assembled. Next, let's move on to the trigger components. Take the trigger and make sure the legs are forward and drop it down. Press with your hand. You can see that it lines up. I like to take one trigger pin and just put it in just a little bit to hold the trigger in place. Now, I'll make sure I don't push the pin far enough to go through the middle of the trigger so I can install the disconnector. Disconnector goes in, the hook forward. Of course, you have your notch for your disconnector spring, which you've installed in the trigger previously. So now we can look through the other hole, and we can start pressing on that trigger pin until we get it to go through the hole of the disconnector. You may have to press the disconnector spring to get the holes to line up. If you have a little bit of pin sticking out and you have some resistance, turn around the other side. Make sure the pin is lined up with the hole on the opposite side of the receiver. Once you see that it is, a little tap is all it takes. Now, let's install the hammer. The hammer can be a little trickier, because we know the springs drive the hammer forward, so we have to make sure we put the legs of the spring back behind the trigger, and then rotate it forward so our hole is lined up. This can be challenging. There. Light tap. Again, we'll check to make sure we're lined up on the other side. Continue to drive the pin flush. Just a little bit. There. Now the hammer and trigger have been installed. Okay. So next, we're going to install the rear takedown pin, the safety selector, and the pistol grip. The pistol grip retains the springs for the selector and the takedown pin. So we take the takedown pin and install it with the groove toward the hole. We take our detent pin, drop it in the hole, follow it with the spring. Now we take our safety selector, install it. The hammer needs to be cocked so the safety selector will clear the trigger. Now we can take this larger piece, the detent for the safety selector, drop it in the hole. Next, let's get the pistol grip out. The larger diameter long spring goes in the hole in the pistol grip. Now carefully slide the pistol grip on As you push it down, it will compress both springs. Next, we'll install the grip screw. Place the lock washer onto the screw. With the lock washer installed, take the grip screw into the grip through the hole, start it into the receiver. Nice and tight. Next, we're going to need the buffer tube and the buffer retainer. Now to assemble the buffer tube, to get ready to go on the receiver, you have your castle nut. You want the castellations, or slots, facing the rear of the tube. And put it all the way down to the end. Now, this is called the end cap, the end plate. You see there's an indentation. On the back of the receiver, you see a matching hole. That's the orientation it should be in. So when you put it onto the buffer tube, make sure that the part sticking out is in the front. Now let's start threading it onto the receiver. Looking closely at the hole in the threads of the receiver where the retainer pin goes, you'll also notice that the buffer tube has an extended part that will capture it. So once we get to here, we'll take our buffer retainer pin and spring, hold it down, and turn the buffer until the extended part is retaining the spring. Now we can slide the end plate forward. Slide the end plate forward. Make sure it's lined up. Get the castle nut on hand tight for now. Now we are going to need to torque this. The torque specifications are 30 to 40 inch. The torque specifications are 30 to 40 foot-pounds. You may also want to use blue Loctite to retain the nut. Some people like to stake it. But if you think in the future you may change buttstocks or use different parts, I wouldn't recommend staking it unless you're 100% sure you're never going to want to take this apart again. So for this video, for my personal guns, I don't stake it because I'm taking them apart and changing them up all the time because they're so much fun. And the castle nut wrench on the castle nut, we're going to start tightening it. You don't have to use a torque wrench. There, 30 foot-pounds. Again, if you wanted to stake it, there are grooves for staking it. However, I don't stake mine. You can also use a drop of blue Loctite. I would not use red Loctite on that thread because if you want to remove it, you're not going to be able to with red, but it's going to be easy to come off with blue. It will not back off over normal use. Now, get our buffer and spring. It slides into the hole and is retained by the buffer retainer spring. The last step of the lower, install the buttstock. The adjustment handle needs to be pulled all the way this way before it will slide on. Once it's slid on into the grooves, you can just press it, make adjustments for length of pull. Now let's go to the upper. Quick recap on the upper receiver parts. We have the forward assist spring, and the roll pin that holds the forward assist into the upper. Dust cover spring, dust cover rod. Let's go ahead and install the forward assist first. One thing to note the Ford Assist. One side is smooth and one side has a notch. Make sure when you install it in the upper that the retaining pin is at the notch. And that's what keeps the Ford Assist from coming out of the receiver. Now, first we want to start the pin. I like to come from the bottom. Now we have it started, we can put the Ford Assist spring on. We make sure that the notch is toward the pin. To get it in, we want to drive the pin until it retains the Ford Assist. There. Now we'll take a punch and drive it flush. Now the Ford Assist is installed and secured in the upper receiver. Now let's put on the dust cover. Dust cover can be tricky. The dust cover spring has to be preloaded while you install the cover. This might take about 7 attempts. So your dust cover rod, you notice a small C-clip in the front. This prevents the rod from moving out of the back of the receiver. The barrel nut, once it's installed, will keep the rod from coming out of the front of the receiver. So the end that has the clip installed will be on the back end toward the front of the rifle. The port door has a spring latch which will hold it closed when it's in the closed position on the upper. We'll start it here. Now the spring. The spring has 2 legs, a short leg and a long leg. You want to orientate the spring so that it pushes the door open and holds it open. So give the spring a small twist, and the long leg goes against the door. Go ahead and start it onto the tube, onto the rod. The short leg goes against the receiver. This is where it's difficult. This, like, for real, might take a couple times. This can be challenging for beginners and experts alike, so don't get frustrated. There. Now you can see the small leg rests against the upper receiver, the long leg against the port door. This keeps the long leg against the dust cover. This allows the spring to keep the dust cover open when you need it to be open. The spring retainer, make sure it stays closed. Now that the upper receiver is assembled, let's talk about putting the barrel on. Now we just need to hold on to the upper so we can install the barrel and the barrel nut. There's a couple different tools you can use to hold the upper receiver assembly. This is one they use in their shop. I use a different one in my shop at home, and you may have a different one in your house. But this one works just great. So we'll set it in, hold it in place with the pins. You notice the barrel has an index pin. There's a corresponding slot in the upper receiver assembly for the index pin to slide into. Seat the barrel, ensuring that the index pin is seated into the slot. On the barrel nut, you want to install a small amount of anti-seize on the threads. You can also use grease, such as Aeroshell grease. any kind of grease you have laying around. Just a little bitty bit. A little bit goes a long way. I'll take the barrel nut. I like to thread it on by hand. And back it up and make sure I got a good distribution of the anti-seize. To torque the barrel nut, you're going to need a 1 1/4 inch adapter. This is a crow's foot. Set at 90 degrees from the torque wrench. Have the torque wrench set at 50 foot-pounds. Good to go. Now that the barrel nut's on, let's get the gas tube and gas block ready to put on. This is your gas block and your gas tube. In the gas block, you'll see a hole. That hole goes over a hole in the barrel, and that's where the gas comes into the gas block and gets put into the bolt carrier by the gas tube. The gas tube has a hole in the bottom, as you can see, and a hole for the pinion tube. To install the gas tube into the gas block, make sure that the hole in the gas tube is pointed downward. As you can see. Also make sure that the hole is lined up between the gas block and the gas tube. Now we just need to put the gas tube roll pin in. I'm using a starter punch. It'll hold the roll pin, allowing me to get it started straight without causing damage. Now that we have it started, we can use a regular punch to drive it the rest of the way. Now that it's flush, let's install it on the barrel and get ready to put on the handguard. The 2 small set screws that came with the gas block, you just want to start them in the holes in the bottom. Make sure they don't protrude to the gas block. So we're going to slide this over the barrel. We don't want those in the way. I just want to take your gas block and gas tube, slide it over the barrel, looking from the front, you want to center up vertically the gas block to make sure that it fits in the slot in the handguard. Now we can tighten the set screws. You can use a bore scope to make sure that the hole in the barrel aligns with the hole in the gas block. We've already checked this previously and we know it's correct. Now, take the handguard, carefully slide it over the barrel and the gas block assembly and over the barrel nut. Alright, now that we get the handguard on, we want to make sure that it's aligned with the top. You can do this by eye, or you can take a scope mount clamp to clamp on there to make sure that it's level. Now we have it flush against the upper receiver. We can tighten the screws that'll clamp the handguard to the barrel nut. Now that we have the handguard clamped to the barrel nut, we want to take the set screws and go ahead and install them through the 2 holes in the bottom of the handguard. Let's go ahead and take this off the mount so you can see that. Using our Allen wrench, start the set screws into their holes. Once the set screws have made contact, you don't want to over tighten them. You just want firm pressure against the barrel nut. And that's going to keep your handguard from sliding forward. The last thing we need to do is install the flash hider. Again, with the flash hider, I like to apply a little bit of anti-seize. It makes it easier to remove later if I have to do maintenance or want to change the handguards. A little bit goes a long way. So I'm going to spread that with my finger to make sure it's deep in the threads. Again, I'm just going to thread this on by hand real quick first to make sure I got a good amount of anti-seize. Perfect. Install the crush washer, convex side and a concave side. It's basically a small end and a big end. I like to have the small end against the barrel. Now we want to time it so that the slots are level to the upper. Now there are a couple ways to make sure it's level. You can do it by eye, or a neat little trick we like to use is have an Allen wrench sitting in the cross threads. And that gives you a visual reference to line up with the flat plane of the upper. Now we can bring it around until it's level. There. Now the flash hider is properly timed. Now let's install the charging handle and bolt carrier group. You notice the 2 ears on the charging handle. They will fit down in 2 slots inside of the upper receiver. Turn the charging handle upside down, slide it in until it drops down those 2 slots and engages in the charging handle slot for the upper receiver. Now take your bolt carrier, using lubrication of your choice, lightly lubricate the contact points. A more detailed description of this process will be found in one of our maintenance videos. Just a light coat. Turn the bolt carrier group upside down. Make sure that the bolt is extended fully forward. Slide it into the upper so it closes. Close your dust cover. Now you have an assembled upper receiver. Now let's put it on the lower, go over some safety checks, and go over some quality checks, and do a function check to make sure that everything is put together correctly. Before we talked about the hammer springs and making sure it was over the trigger. The legs of the hammer spring will fall into little slots cut on the trigger and will engage in a slot in the trigger pin, which will hold it into the receiver. You can cock the hammer and make sure that the selector rotates to the safe position, to the fire position. Looks good. Now let's push the detent pins out and put the upper and lower receiver together. Now that we have the upper and lower receiver together, let's do a quick function check. It's always a good idea to make sure the rifle's clear. Even though we just built it, it's still best practice to check every rifle that you handle to make sure it's clear. We inspect the chamber, the rifle is clear. Now we'll do a simple function check. With the safety in the safe position, pulling the trigger will not cause the hammer to fall. Now we want to move it to fire. We want to pull the trigger, let the hammer fall, and hold the trigger to the rear. Now, charge the rifle again, release the bolt, now release the trigger. You should hear a click when the disconnector engages. Good to go. Now the rifle will be able to fire again. Release the trigger, pull the charging hand to the rear. Make sure that the hammer stays cocked by pulling it again. Great, everything's working like it's supposed to. The rifle cannot be placed on safe, however, unless the hammer is cocked. Let's charge the weapon one more time, put the rifle on safe. Now we've built our first rifle. Now that we've built the first rifle, you built your first rifle, you may notice I'm using different tools than you have, or different tools than you may see in other videos. My own personal shop at home, I even use different tools than what they have here at the shop. As long as you're using the right quality, good quality tools, you have the right parts and pieces, and you take your time and you go careful and you follow the directions, a lot of different tools will work. Now that your rifle's built, the next step is take it out to the range, test fire it, start making memories.